Okay, we're good. Hello, Alex. We're so happy to have you here with us at Lebanese Independent Film Festival. We want you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Alright, so I'm Alex Dahdah. I directed the film Broadcast Reverse with Talim Bedikian. She wasn't able to be here with us today, but of course I'm going to be here. And I'm very excited to be in this festival. Everything's so beautiful, so well organized.
Okay, would you like to tell us about your movie? What is it called and what is it about?
Of course, so the film is called Broadcast Reverse. It was initially introduced as Khabar Ajal, and it was introduced a while ago on social media platforms because it was filmed as a broadcast on a national television, in a national television studio. It was filmed in LBCI studios. And the way it starts is that you think that it's actually going to be a broadcast news, but then it flips into becoming kind of like a mockumentary kind of thing. And it focuses as much as possible on kind of like the gender stereotypes that are replicated in the vernacular use on mainstream newscasts. And in the media in general, and the kind of conflicts that happen, of course, with like producers and etc., trying to kind of retain their audience, even if that might be hurting or affecting a certain group in the society.
Okay, so what was your main inspiration for it?
So initially, we were part of kind of like a fellowship, kind of grant thing that was organized by Search for Common Grounds, which is a non-profit that is based all around the world, but also in Lebanon, and it was funded by a bad non-profit as well. The British Embassy also funded the project, and later on I also got in touch with the Lebanese American University and LBCI, and the idea behind the project was that they wanted to work on short films that were about the women's participation in the political sphere. And at the time there were parliament elections. They didn't end up happening that year, but we worked on something that was related to that, and that's why at the time I wrote the film, and I wanted it to be about not as much about why we should encourage women to be in the political sphere, but it was about the irony of how the media is doing so, and about how the terms and the words that they use end up kind of like being kind of ironic, and they kind of belittling in the way that they use them. Certain expressions like al-mara nussatain al-mujtama, like what does that even mean, right? And like some other things as well. And we worked on that with a bunch of friends that I had back when I was in college, and I also had my dear friend Talim Bedikian, who was also directing the film with me.
Okay, so did you face any difficulties during the shooting of it?
So it was, I would even call it like the very, very first thing I ever filmed. Like I wouldn't even call it my first film. It was like a 5-minute short, and it was like really our first time on set, trying to like rent a location, trying to get equipment, trying to like maneuver our way like throughout it. And like, of course, like we got the grant money that like was from the organizations that participated, but like, in addition to that, it wasn't really enough to be like doing what we were aiming for. So it was all about communication, going to LBCI, being like, hey, can we use your newscast studio? We know that you actually are using this, but we need to use it for a project. And it was all about getting to convince them that this is a project that will represent them well. We're not going to use this against them, because we also got access to like their entire studio and everything there. So I think what was great about it is that everyone was very supportive, and I think it could be because we were young and we were students and we were trying to work on something that was actually meaningful to us. So, I mean, the difficulty was that it was our first time, I think, for most of us that were on this set, but it went great. And the result was like, I think it was good to us, and it had a certain impact when we screened it the first time.
What income do you expect out of the movie? Do you hope for any certain impact?
So initially we weren't gonna have it in film festivals. It was gonna be this thing that we want to like throw around. Like we were gonna send it to people and pretend that it was an actual broadcast. Like, listen to this. This went on LBC. Like, what do you think about it? But then after a while, a lot of people who weren't Lebanese but could like understand the dialect spoken, or of course, as we speak standard Arabic sometimes on the news, a lot of people who were from Egypt and Jordan who weren't keeping up with the news were like, is this actually happening? Like, what is going on here? Because everything looked real in it, and it was very interesting to see what kind of comments they had, how they started perceiving things from another way. So the impact isn't something, I'm not trying to tell people do this and don't do that. I'm just trying to highlight something about the media, highlight certain practices, and highlight certain ways in which the media uses their words, and in which the producers kind of write their scripts in their newscast rooms. So
what made you participate with us this year in the LIFF Festival?
So as I said, initially we weren't planning to send it to film festivals, but then we realized that although film festivals have a very specific audience, and sometimes it tends to be niche, there are also an audience that grasps the information and then reproduces it in their own work. So even if the majority of the audience today would be people either in the film industry or filmmakers themselves, by watching this film and by grasping this sort of information that I gained, I hope that they would be inspired by it and recreate work that would kind of like re-bring this information again. Kind of like, you know, it's kind of like when you learn something new and then you recreate something based on it, or it kind of just inspires their work in a way. So I'm trying as much as possible, even though it isn't now in mainstream kind of like social media platforms, to bring it back to the industry, to the people in this field. I think that's going to be pretty much what it is. And also like to the crew that worked on this film, I think that most of us would be happy to kind of see it kind of in this setup, because at the time we weren't as much going to film festivals and part of this like kind of sphere and this kind of world of things. So I think it's nice for us to see this film also because of all the work that it took, kind of like take its space also in those spaces.
So what year was it made again?
So it was made around 2018, kind of like terminated around that time. It was kind of practically managed by the non-profit at the time. So they kind of like published it in different places. They took care of all there wasn't really distribution, there wasn't any monetary kind of value to it, but it was mostly about like getting it to the people. And then we of course had some presence on LBCI at the time to talk about the project because they were part of it. But later on it kind of like went silent. We were like, okay, the parliament elections did not even happen.
Yeah.
And today, now that I see, well, there is some sort of discussions about that. I don't know how exactly relevant it is, because of course gender stereotypes and things that relate to that keep evolving in ways, not necessarily positively, but they shift, they change, the narrative changes in certain ways. And I'm intrigued by the relevance that it might still hold now in the current narrative.
So now in 2023, you'd say that it's still relevant, and how satisfied are you about it?
You know, I'm very satisfied for something that we did for the very first time, and not that it's bad and I'm like, you know, like telling myself that it's good enough, but about the fact that it is what it's supposed to be. It is this thing that looks like a newscast, but then out of nowhere it turns out to this very ironic piece that is about something very like intricate as like the words that people use. And it is something that I'm very interested in, linguistics, the way people speak. And of course the rest of the crew was also very much interested by the fact that it looks real, like we're kind of like shooting a newscast. And at the time we were taking our television production courses, all of these things, and we're like, we're gonna do something that is very related to that, but we're gonna twist it, and it's gonna be a mockumentary. And in regards to your question about how relevant it still is today, you know, I'm questioning myself still. Are we still questioning things about the relevance of gender in the political participation, or are we re-questioning the entire idea of political representation in Lebanon? So I'm still intrigued by how people are going to receive it, and that's why I'm trying to be here, see what kind of conversations people have about it, and how the Q&A is going to go about that kind of thing.
Alex, Dahdah, we're so excited to have you to see your movie, and we're so happy to have you here with us in the Lebanese Independent Film Festival. Thanks for participating, and we wish you best of luck.
Thank you very much. I was happy to be here.